In Progress, Short Stories About Young Latinos by Lulu Delacre. Chapter 1, The Attack. De noche, todos los gatos son pardos. Emilio watched the steam rise from the hot iron as Mama pressed the collar of Mr. Roddock's perfectly white shirt. She stared out the window of the laundry room at her old green van parked by the edge of the manicured lawn. As soon as we're done here, I'll drop you two home and head to the pharmacy, she told Emilio and Jose. I need to get Tony's epilepsy medicine. Mama frowned, and Emilio knew she worried about the medicine. Can we go with you? Asked Jose, standing by the tall double dryer. To buy new school supplies. Don't think so, mijo, Mama said, wiping sweat beads from her forehead with the back of her hand. Tell you what, on Saturday I'll take you and Emilio to the Minneapolis back-to-school fair for some free supplies. See? Emilio heard the eagerness in Mama's voice, like she was offering a chocolate-covered almond instead of a stale peanut. He lifted his eyes from his book and saw his twin slide down against the dryer's door to land on the floor, sulking. Yeah, we'll find something, Emilio said to soothe Jose. Emilio knew how hard Mama worked as a maid in 10 different houses to make ends meet. 3 of their older brothers were on their own, but since Papa had trouble holding down a job, and Tony's was part-time because of his disability, Mama was the main provider for the family. She went on vacation only every 2 years. That's when the bunch of them would pack into their van and drive the long way south to their parents' native Guanajuato in Mexico to visit family and friends. Mama said she didn't want her U.S.-born sons to lose track of their roots. When school starts, Jose said as he jumped to his feet, me and my friends Marco and Pablo are starting a football club. Emilio will be in it too. Right, Emilio? Last year the teacher told us that you can be anything you want in America, and I am going to be una estrella de fútbol. Que bueno, said Mama. How come? Now come, my soccer star, and help me carry up these ironed clothes. Today my mama had insisted on bringing Emilio and Jose to work. Emilio had a cold, and even though they were already 11, Mama did not like to leave them alone in the house. Emilio knew why. He had once overheard Mama talking to the neighbor about how special he and his brother were. They are milagros, Mama had said. The way Mama told it, she'd known she would be having identical twins long before she had gone to the doctor. La Virgen de Guadalupe had told her so in a dream. She was old, 51, and was not supposed to be able to have any more children. After raising 3 boys and having to manage Tony's condition, she was also exhausted. Mama said that when her milagros arrived, the light of day came into her life again. Emilio smiled at the thought of being a miracle. The twins ran upstairs as soon as they got home. Emilio went into their room first, wanting to see Tony before he left for work. Lately he had noticed that Tony's seizures had become more frequent. His older brother would complain about how scary it was when the attacks came without warning. Tony said it was better to feel the trembling and the chills in his body, the metallic taste in his mouth, than to be taken by surprise. The nasty symptoms allowed him to get ready. It's horrible, Tony had tried to describe it to Emilio, what an epileptic attack was like. It's like having a huge electric storm inside my head. An unstoppable storm. Tony was coming out of the shower and reached for his meds on top of the chest of drawers. He found the vial empty. Mama is bringing your prescription soon, Emilio said. That's right, agreed Jose, pulling Emilio by the shirt to coax him into playing an action video game next to him. Tony finished getting dressed and headed downstairs for a snack before catching the bus. Do you two want some pineapple? He called from the kitchen. I'm cutting up a new one that Mama brought last night. No thanks, Emilio and Jose yelled at the same time. Gracias. Emilio got up and went into the bathroom. On top of the toilet tank was Tony's medic aid bracelet. It was engraved with his condition and he was supposed to wear it at all times, but his brother didn't like to shower with it. Emilio could hear his mother's voice in his head, upset with Tony for forgetting the bracelet in the bathroom. Tony, Emilio hollered, your bracelet. But before Tony could answer, a loud thump came from downstairs, followed by a string of shattering noises. Emilio raced down the stairs and slid to a stop outside the small, dark kitchen. Tony was sprawled on the floor, clutching a bloody knife in his right fist, his eyelids fluttering, eyeballs rolling back. Pieces of pineapple were scattered across the kitchen. Emilio opened his mouth, wanting to call Jose, but nothing would come out. So he stood there, frozen. Suddenly he felt his twin's presence. He turned to see Jose springing from the stairs and lunging toward Tony, ready to take the knife out of his hand. No, Emilio yelled. Don't touch him. He could hurt you if he starts jerking around. I'll call 911. Within minutes, blaring sirens filled the air. Two officers from the station around the corner burst through the front door. Get out of the way, said one of them, pushing Emilio to the side, as soon as he saw Tony lying on the floor with the knife in his hand. The officers rushed into the kitchen to control the situation. They screamed at Tony and kicked him several times to make him release his tight grip on the knife. But instead, the blows seemed to trigger another seizure. Tony flailed his arm, and the knife's blade sliced into the leg of one of the officers. What an idiot, the injured policeman cried, cursing under his breath. Backup officers pushed their way into the house, yelling back and forth, one louder than the other. Emilio retreated to the floor of the stairs and crouched by the doorway, covering his ears, his eyes glued to the scene. Jose shouted through the commotion as he tried to explain his brother's condition to the police. And adding to the mayhem, a tall officer stormed into the house. She drew her gun and aimed it at Tony, who was now lying motionless and barely conscious on the linoleum floor. Don't shoot, someone ordered. Handcuff the guy and take him in. Charge him with assault on a law enforcement officer. On that command, a policeman put Tony's arms behind his back, handcuffed him, and started to read him his rights. No, screamed Jose. He didn't mean it. He's sick, Emilio whispered. He has epilepsy. Mama pulled into the driveway to find Tony being pushed by his head into the back seat of a police car, its engine rumbling. Ay, Diosito mío! Emilio heard her scream as she jumped out of her van, dropping Tony's medicine. My God, what is going on? She ran after the car as it rounded the corner. Come back, she cried again and again. From that day on, Emilio began to have nightmares. As days turned into weeks, the nightmares became more frequent and scarier. In the still of the night, he would wake up sobbing. When this happened, Jose would move to his side and lie quietly next to him until Emilio fell asleep again. One night, Emilio could not go back to sleep. Even with Jose by his side, he couldn't stop thinking about all the things that had happened since that awful afternoon. Their parents had received a letter from the police suing Tony for attempting to harm an officer. Their mother had held endless conversations with Tony's social worker, neurologist, and lawyer. The court date for Tony to defend himself was fast approaching, but even with the likely prospect of all charges being dropped and the lawsuit being dismissed because of Tony's medical condition, Papa had been threatening to leave the United States for good. He thought the police had singled them out and didn't feel welcome anymore. Part of Emilio wanted to leave too, go far, far away to Mexico, where he wouldn't have to walk by the police station on his way home from school. Every time he did, his breathing became shallow, his skin felt clammy, and the blood drained from his face. But part of Emilio wanted to stay. He was sad for Jose, knowing how hard it would be for him to leave. Just 2 months into middle school, Jose was having a great time. He had joined a soccer club just like he had dreamed about. He liked his teachers and had made many new friends. Not Emilio. At school, Emilio could hardly concentrate. He couldn't help but wonder why all of this had to happen. If he hadn't called 911, Tony would never have been arrested. He replayed the scene in his head over and over, each time coming up with a different ending, one that did not involve Tony getting sent to jail, creating more problems for Mama to try to solve. At times, Emilio wondered, if he hadn't called, would Jose have been able to pry the knife out of Tony's hand safely? Calling for help was the right thing to do. Jose kept telling him. True, they had learned at school that in an emergency you called 911. But was that wrong? And what if Tony had been wearing his bracelet? Maybe then the officers would have understood right away that he was ill. In the end, Emilio knew he was the only one who'd chosen to make the call that had triggered the horrible events. No one else. They are my milagros, Mama always said. Some miracle he was. Since school started, Emilio had been to the counselor's office many times. The counselor had asked endless questions, trying to figure out what was going on in his head. Why had his grades worsened? Why wasn't he engaged in school? Emilio was polite but refused to talk. He couldn't bear to say a single word that would remind him of the events of that afternoon. Each time someone brought up the subject, Emilio clammed up, stone-faced. Outside the sun rose, and at that first morning light, Emilio felt a headache coming on. Jose jumped out of bed. "Let's go, Emilio," he exclaimed. "I have soccer practice at school today." Emilio got ready for school in wordless, mechanical motions. Later in the afternoon, Mama and Papa were meeting with his school counselor. What would come of it? Emilio wondered. That evening, Emilio was home, helping to clear the dinner dishes along with Jose. It was then that Mama gathered the family together. "Vamos a rezar," Mama said. "Let's pray." Emilio knew something was troubling Mama. When she was troubled, she would urge the family to pray the rosary in the middle of the week. Emilio, Jose, Mama, Papa, and Tony alternated Hail Marys for every single bead. After they were done, Mama leaned back in her chair. "Listen, niños," she said, measuring her words. "Your father and I think you need to finish school in Mexico. Tony will stay here in the house with one of your older brothers. He needs the care that the county provides." Emilio looked up, holding his breath. "What?" Jose blurted from the edge of his seat. "You mean forever?" "No, not forever. We'll drive back to visit, just as we visited Mexico some summers. It will be great to live there with family and friends who love you. Aren't you excited?" Mama said, trying to make light of it. Jose sank in his chair. Emilio glanced down, pulled into the well-known dark place again. He could almost hear his twins' thoughts. What about Marco, Pablo, and all his new soccer buddies? Was he supposed to leave the only home he had ever known? The country of his birth? Would he ever become a football star if he left America? Jose had shared his dreams so many times with Emilio. Emilio felt tears running down his cheeks. A tear for his brother, a tear for himself. Jose stood up, ready to protest, but then his gaze met Emilio's. Their eyes locked, and Emilio knew Jose was looking deep into Emilio's soul, seeing the relief, the sorrow, the confusion. Jose sat down again. "See, Mama," said Jose flatly. "It will be great moving to Mexico." When Emilio heard Jose, he felt like a lead cloud had been lifted. His twin had chosen for both of them. He got up and gave Jose a warm hug. Gently, Mama placed her rosary back in its small wicker box and breathed deeply. "You know," she said to Papa, "I feel torn about leaving Tony behind, and we don't know if I'll find work in Mexico." She rose, smoothing her shirt, and walked to the stove to finish cleaning. Jose had turned Emilio's hug into a wrestling match. They grappled with each other on the floor. Emilio had just pinned Jose when he saw Mama clutch the silver medal of the Virgin de Guadalupe that hung by her heart and stare at the sky out the window. For a second, guilt gripped Emilio again, thinking of Mama's worry, but then Jose made him laugh, and Mama turned to them. A broad smile brightened her face as she looked from Emilio to Jose and back to Emilio. "Mis milagros," Mama whispered, and suddenly Emilio knew it was their smiles that fed Mama's. That was the real miracle.